And it all comes back to, again, are you interested in this? It sounds like a lot of work, and it is. But if you truly enjoy it and you're really excited about the specialty or niche that you're providing, it doesn't feel as hard.
Have you actually used data to make a go versus no go decision on purchasing a piece of equipment or starting a specialty in your practice? Dr. Jennifer Stewart, who has been a pretty regular guest on the Think Again podcast, speaks with me about the ways that we can make much more informed decisions on these substantial decisions and capital expenditures. At the core of it all is digging in on ideas for your practice that truly give you joy. Listen in. This is really good. This is the Think Again podcast. I'd like to pick your brain on the idea of using data even to assess the feasibility of our interest in adding services, specialties to our practices. I know you have had a sports vision practice. Did you just do that out of the love of the specialty? Did you do it with a predetermined plan on what might come out of it in terms of number of patients, or was there data driven there? How did you think about doing specialty work?
So a little different with the sports vision practice. I did it more out of the love of it. And there wasn't a lot of data, and there still is not a lot of data in sports vision. So I think in one aspect, it was a little easier slash harder because I just went into it and there weren't a lot of people doing it. So I just made it up as I went along. But now I have the ability to help doctors in sports vision specifically look at the equipment, look at their space, and look at how they can generate cash flow to pay for that. I tried, I did the best. I didn't go into it just hoping for the best, but I didn't really have anyone to ask about that. So I will say and this was a long time ago, and now there's more people doing it. So I think there's a little more data and information out there.
But let's talk about it from the perspective of you now giving people advice. Is it is it as simple as going into your practice database and checking out the number of patients you've seen that are high school age, like 13 to 19 or something, and saying some portion of those could use sports vision benefit if I marketed them right? Do you actually think about it that way, or is that not a good way to think about it?
I think it's a great way to think about it. And I think we skip that step a lot. And I think the benefit of optometry, one of the many great things of optometry is that we have this ability to do so many amazing, cool things, and we can follow our passions and our interests. Sometimes I think we skip over looking at our current patients and forget that it's still a business. And while it's fun to follow your dreams and have a passion and want to do something different, you have to look at it as a separate business. And, in sports vision, it's a little bit different. My sports vision practice was completely separate than my primary care practice. But if I was doing sports vision here, that's exactly what I would do. Or I would start to talk to patients and start to look at what they do outside of the exam lane, how many of them are playing sports. I think first piece is really having a love for it. And that's another one I think we skip over too, is that these specialties take time, they take dedication, they take blood, sweat, and tears, and they take a lot of work and time and effort. And we have to kind of balance both of those. And I think some of us go into it looking, okay, I want to make money. And I heard Dr. Stewart talk about sports vision. So I want to do it for the money aspect, but I don't know if I really like sports or talking to people about sports. Or they go into it the reverse. I love it, but I haven't thought about it as a business side. So I think there's a perfect match, and you have to have both, especially in the specialties like dry eye and aesthetics, which I think are so popular right now. I think you really have to kind of have both of those sides. Like, I'm really, truly interested in this deep down, and this is something I really want to do. And now I'm going to look and analyze the business side of it. I really think you need both.
That's interesting because I do think in dry eye and aesthetics, those that think about expanding their practice to include a specialty clinic for it have this passion for the outcome that they give for the patient. In myopia management, it's a little harder to put your finger on it. Like,
Yeah.
it's a little harder to say we've made it, right? And so I wonder if there's as much love as there is business opportunity. But as long as you encourage us to have both, I'll do that. How do I get myself a data mindedness around any of those? Let's use myopia management again. Is it searching your database? How do you advise us to use data to be really sure that we're going to be successful. We're going to get patient outcomes to where we want them to be, but we're going to be successful and pay off the equipment. I mean, you got to start making a list of what you need, I guess.
I think that's the first step is, okay, if it's myopia management, and I do a lot of myopia management here, it's okay, I'm a mom. So first I'm passionate about it because I have 2 boys and it's really something I truly deep down believe all of us should be doing. But I always look at whatever specialty it is as a separate business. And I encourage doctors to almost look at it, if you've cold started or bought a practice, as writing a business plan and saying, okay, what am I spending on? If it's myopia management, do I have a topographer? Am I measuring? Am I, taking axial length? What does that cost me if I'm doing that? Now, what am I charging? What am I adding on to my fees, whether that be OrthoK or my site or eventually the ophthalmic lenses that we hopefully get? How many patients do I need to see to cover those costs? And I think just kind of looking at it there first, and then taking a breath and going, okay, if it's X dollars and I need X patients, do I have those patients already? Somebody like me who's a cold start, I don't have those patients already. I don't have a database to mine. If I don't have those patients, how am I going to get out there and find them? And I want to pause there, because I think so much in specialties is, if I build it, they will come. And I will tell you, in sports vision, that did not happen. I thought I'd open with this great idea and I'm the smartest person and sports vision's so cool. All I have to do is just open and people will beat down my door. 100%. I opened and no one came. So I think, in first, how am I going to get those patients if I don't have them already? And now developing a marketing plan. And it's just like cold starting a practice, right? What's the investment I'm making? How many patients do I need to see, or what's my chair cost? How am I going to pay for what I'm doing? And how do I get those patients? And that is one of the places I see so many doctors get tripped up in, because there are so many cool instruments and technology out there that the reps do a great job selling, and they sell it as, these are cash pay patients. If you build it, they will come, and they don't come. So we have to figure out, how much does it cost me? How do I pay this back and be profitable? But the third piece is, how do I get those people in my chair? Because it's not as easy as just saying I'm a myopia management specialist, or I do dry eye, or whatever that is, I do aesthetics. It's having a detailed marketing plan, then to go back and see if it's working. You have to have that plan in place before you can start tracking those metrics.
You've cracked an egg on equipment. I'm going to come back to it. We're going to let that egg sit for just a second.
Yeah.
I want to go back to this idea that the specialty clinics we build are separate businesses. I love that mindset, because to the audience, listen, you have to think about this that way. You have to think about that business sustaining itself. And as we talk about equipment and other overhead costs, we'll get to the capital equipment, but you built your sports vision practice in a different location. Most of us will build these in our practices. When you build that plan, you think about what it's going to cost, thereby how much revenue you need to offset it. How do you deal with the sharing of staff? Even though it's a separate business, some of our staff are serving both businesses, our primary care business and the specialty. Do you have any advice on how to get that number right at the outset? Because it does impact the decision to buy and build the specialty.
I think I would look at it, the opportunity cost. If you are a cold start and your staff is sitting around and it's just something else they would do, that's a little bit easier. If you have that staff who might have the time, I think it's a little bit easier there to build that in. But I would look at it also on the space. If you are taking an exam lane out of play, what does that do to your patient schedule and your staffing needs? Just like that, do I need more staff to run this part of my specialty? Can my staff do both? I would calculate it, based on the per hour needs of that specialty as a separate business, and say, if it's my dry eye specialty, and out of the 40 hours I'm in the practice, I'm just, making up as I go along, 8 hours a week, I'm going to focus on seeing dry eye patients. and I need a technician to do that, and I pay them $25 an hour. And that's what I'm going to consider, because eventually my goal is that I will have somebody dedicated to that part. It might not be today and it might not be tomorrow, but eventually, that's the staffing cost. So now how do I build my fee structure? It might be that, Jen is doing both, right? She might not be doing 8 hours now, but I'm looking long term at building that. And that's how I would look at it is, plan for where you want to be, not where you are right at the moment.
Right. And so at the outset, you can plan for a fractional part of your employee's time on that business, assign that expense to that pro forma. I got it. Now
Yep.
let's crack that egg all the way open, because all these specialties need types of capital equipment. Um, Obviously, we could not talk about this in a specialty mode. We could talk about it in a primary care mode. I've got a new eyeball imaging thing I want to buy or lease. And in many ways, we get advised by the people selling it.
They're good.
Tell us about how we should think about this from a data perspective.
Oh, I love sales reps, and I think they are just an amazing partner to our practice. But first and foremost, they are salespeople. And, some of them are a little less salesy in our practices, and maybe they're more on the supportive role. But a lot of these big capital expense equipment purchases, you have a salesperson, and then once that is done, you're turned over to the support team. The salesperson's job is to really get you excited and interested. And sometimes, they come here all the time, and Dr. Stewart, your practice is beautiful, you should be doing this. And I go, great, I just don't have any interest in it. So one of my friends is doing this right now. She is looking at buying a dry eye device for her practice, and she said that the rep is no one has it around them, they're missing out on potential patients, and they could pay it off so fast, and it's very easy to do. And that was my advice to her was, it's not an inexpensive piece of equipment. It is probably more than, when I think about it as a cold start, it's probably more of an investment than anything else I bought in my practice, anything. And I said, okay, I would take that and set that aside and say, this is my new business. You don't have to make it a separate LLC, but break that down and say, if the cost is X, how many patients do I have to see to pay that bill off? And this is where I see doctors getting into trouble. And I do a lot of work consulting with cold starts or new practices. And hopefully I get there hopefully we have this conversation first, because I've been on the other side where they're stuck with this boat anchor that they are struggling they don't have, it was very exciting at first, right? We've all bought something that we're super excited about, and we just get busy and it just collects dust. And these are expensive pieces of equipment where they didn't sit down and say, okay, every month I'm going to check and see how I'm doing on this piece of equipment in my separate business. And am I meeting my patient goals? What's my marketing strategy? What have I invested in my marketing? What's my ROI? And I love talking about separating our optical and clinical business too, because so often it just gets added in, right? It's just another expense, and it's like, okay, I'll focus on that tomorrow because I don't see it. And the practice is growing. My practice is growing, but that piece of equipment is sat there for 6 months and no one's turned it on. But if we look at it separately, it's a little more painful almost to see it, and it's a little more in our face.
And I would suggest we have our colleagues talk to these reps or work with the reps on what we talked about earlier. Sift through the last 3 or 6 months of patients, search by ICD-10 codes that are eligible for being, these services being delivered to. Obviously, some of them are cash pay, so it's not about how many I billed to insurance, but how many of these did I code?
Yeah.
And think a little bit about the facts of the number of patients you see as opposed to the hope. Now, obviously, you're going to start looking at new patients or patients who weren't coded on those diagnoses in a new lens when you get the piece of equipment, but you really have to dig in to make sure you can cover that over at least a 6-month nut, wouldn't you think?
I think so. And then have a plan, a true
Yeah,
marketing plan, not just I'm going to send out an email blast and tell
right.
patients what I do, and they're going to pick up the phone and call, because they won't.
Yeah.
They won't. they need to be marketed to. And, you watch any, the Super Bowl, like we're all being marketed to very specifically. And if you don't think that there's marketing data behind who was watching, what the sales are after, we have to think of this as a business and as a really to watch that and to see, is my marketing strategy working? If it's not, I have to pivot. But how do you know if it's not working if you're not tracking that? And I think that's where, yes, looking at and mining for our patients if you're an established practice, but then having a marketing, an internal and external marketing strategy and plan to target those patients, and then track and keep measuring and then keep going. It's not a one time, I'm going to send out an email blast. How many people opened the email and signed up? It's this ongoing, constant effort. And it all comes back to, again, are you interested in this? It sounds like a lot of work, and it is. But if you truly enjoy it and you're really excited about the specialty or niche that you're providing, it doesn't feel as hard. But I see so many doctors who are really excited more of the idea of the specialty and the idea of what that could be for them and the idea of the outcomes, but skipping over the really hard work that, makes it look like an overnight success. And that's where I challenge people. If you really passionately, deeply feel that this is something you want to do, then by all means jump in with both feet. But don't do it because a rep tells you it's a cash pay business. And if you have 2 patients a month, you'll easily cover your costs. That is the worst marketing. They're like, that's what the rep told me about marketing. I was like, that's a sales tactic. That's not a marketing strategy. Where do those patients come from? So if you love what you do and you have a passion, there are things that I have zero interest in doing here. And that makes my decision really easy when the reps come and knocking and say, Dr. Stewart, your practice would be perfect for this. And I go, I don't want to do it. Like, I'm just not interested. So that makes it easier, where I think we have some FOMO sometimes, and the reps feed off of that, right? If you're not doing it, somebody else is. I'm like, great. I hope they're doing a fantastic job. Who can I refer to? Like, you're not, unless you give it to me for free, you're not going to, don't try and create this fear of these patients leaving, because they shouldn't be with me for these specialty services if it's not something I truly believe in, or really, not that I don't believe in it, but have this passion for. I don't want them to see me for that either.
And a lot of the data assessments we've talked about today are longitudinal over time business expenses. So marketing plans are going to have to be evergreen. They're going to have to continue. And there's going to be upgrade costs in software sometimes for some of the pieces of equipment you buy. Put all of that in and think about this in the longer term, not just can you do 2 patients a month for the next 3 or 6 months, but what does this look like 2 years from now? Who in the practice is using this? How much of my practice time we spent devoted to these kind of additional services? And that encouragement I hear from you loud and clear.
Yes. And I will say, my specialty here is beautiful eyewear. That is my focus at Look in my cold start. And that is my niche. That's my specialty. If you walked in here, you would have no doubt what we were all about here. Everything in the practice was designed with that in mind. So we're all in here, and that is my location, my branding, the way the practice looks, the way the practice smells, how you interact with us. So it's not something I dabbled in, and it's not something that I thought, well, I kind of want to do a little bit of everything. And when I was creating this, I said, what do I like? What do I do well? And why don't I focus on that? And instead of trying to do everything and do none of it well, I've picked the 1 or 2 things that I think I shine at, and that patients can feel that from me. I love comprehensive care, and I love beautiful eyewear, and I love myopia management. That's pretty much all I do here, and contact lenses, but that's what I do here. And I lean into that 100%. And every metric, I use every metric on the eyewear side. I have to get a little bit better at longitudinal versus short term. So I'm like, no, I need the results now. Like, what did we sell today? So, but I think I love it. It's not work to me. On the weekends, I'm looking at frame lines. I'm reading articles about selling and dispensing and technology. So to me, it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
And that's when you know the specialty that you're investing in is the right one, or if it's the right thing for you, is when it doesn't feel like work to spend time, your money, your free time, or going to conferences to learn. That's I think we all need to kind of take a pause and take a look in the mirror and go, do I actually want to do this, or am I doing it because it's the next thing in optometry, or that I have FOMO and feel that if I don't do it, I'm somehow missing out? I encourage people to kind of stop, ignore the noise, look in the mirror and say, what do I actually want to do in optometry? And is that what I'm doing? And is that the path I'm on? And if not, stop that path before you sign on the dotted line.
Well, incredible advice, Dr. Jennifer Stewart. Thank you for again being my guest on the Think Again podcast.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's Think Again podcast, brought to you by GPN Visions, a peer-to-peer learning community to help grow your eye care business.